Okay, let's get into a deep dive on the second ship in the Timeless Legacy bundle, the Okinawa Pilot Raider. Like the name suggests, the Okinawa is a pilot ship, meaning it's going to be small, fast, and maneuverable, and it is a raider, which means it's going to be very flexible in the bridge officer seating because it's going to have a bunch of universal seating. It's out right now on PC. Console, you guys will be getting this ship on August 27th. Let's get a look at the rest of this. The Okinawa was originally a ship that first appeared in the Star Trek game Star Trek Starfleet Command, an old favorite of mine, which I very much enjoyed. I always thought this was a cool ship. I'm really glad to see this one finally show up in Star Trek Online. I was actually really surprised it never showed up in the 15th anniversary bundle. I was fully expecting this to show up there, but I'm glad they got the opportunity to throw this one into Star Trek Online as well because it's a really cool looking ship. But yeah, this will come with 3 skins: the Okinawa class, which is the TMP version. This one, they're calling it the Ventura class, which actually originally appears in the IDW comic book Star Trek Crew. So there's another out there licensed property that is Star Trek Online is bringing in. So that's always nice to see more collaboration stuff like that. So we're getting a TOS version of the ship, and we're also getting a Stowe era original of this ship. This is called the Alameda class. Honestly, this one doesn't click with me nearly as well as the other two. I've been seeing a lot of people calling this the Star Trek version of a B-wing, and to that, all I gotta say is I like my version better. Anyway, let's get a look at the stats before we go really deep dive into the rest of this thing. Okinawa's got a hull modifier of 0.95, a shield modifier of 1.25, which is kind of high for an escort and kind of useless too. Like putting shields on an escort, that's like, putting RGB lighting in your computer. It's kind of neat, but it's not going to do anything. The weapons layout, 5-1 weapons layout, which is exactly what you want it to be on a ship like this. 2 device slots, which is pretty standard for a raider. Bridge officer seating is Commander Tactical / Pilot, Lieutenant Commander Universal / Pilot, Lieutenant Commander Universal, Lieutenant Universal, and Ensign Universal. So like I said, a lot of universal seating, very typical for a raider. It's a shame that this thing is double pilot. That seems to be, like with all of these summer 3-ship bundles, they always double up on the specialization seating. Hit the mic. They always double up on the specialization seating for some reason. I really wish they'd stop doing that. It really hurts the performance of most of these ships. I want to go more into this topic later, but I'm going to save that for another video. But yeah, consoles, 4 tactical, 3 engineering, 4 science, which is kind of weird. It's kind of heavy on science in the consoles, which not that it really matters at all these days, because thanks to Lvoven, you're mainly going to be reliant on your universal consoles more than anything else, so that's not really a big deal. Turn rate is 18, impulse modifier of 0.2, and an inertia rating of 85, so it's going to be very small, very fast, but also very squishy thanks to that hull modifier. It can equip dual cannons and has improved raider flanking, which means you're going to really want to focus on hitting your enemies in their aft arcs. We'll get into the console in a little bit. It's got a unique experimental weapon, which we'll also get into. It's got the pilot maneuvers mechanic, which you would expect. It is a full pilot ship, and it has the Raider Mastery package, which gives buffs to accuracy. They're calling this accuracy miss. That's just defense rating. So it means the more likely an enemy is likely to miss you with their weapons. The damage buff and crit chance. Honestly, it's not a bad ship. Frankly, it's better than most of the other ships in this bundle, which is really saying something when we're saying that the ship with double pilot seating is better than the other two. But yeah, that's kind of the thing that really brings this one down, because you're not going to really be able to do a lot with pilot seating in a PvE setting. I know PvPers might disagree with me on this one. I know they've got, PvP is a lot more pilot focused because, you got a lot of stuff that's built for speed, which speed is very important in PvP, but in PvE, less important. So really the only thing I'm using on here is Clean Getaway, just because it's an uncon trigger, and I'm using Double Pilot Team because, one, it does buff speed. Speed is still fairly important in a PvE setting, but it's more just for getting from point A to point B rather than evading an actual enemy, which is what the PvPers are going to be doing more with their speed buffs. The reason I'm using the dual pilot team is more just for the sake of 2 of the traits that I'm using. Synthetic Good Fortune, which I'm using every time I activate a pilot ability. I'm getting buffs to control expertise and crit chance, which stack pretty impressively. So I just keep spamming those abilities, and I'm going to be gaining those crit chance and control buffs. And I am also reducing the shared cooldown of the pilot team, both pilot team seats, by using Fresh from R&R. It's hardly a meta strategy, but it's good for gaining a good amount of crit chance over time. And plus, it's an relatively easy thing to get. Like, Fresh from R&R is still a lockbox personal trait, but Synthetic Good Fortune, that is a C-Store Starship trait that comes off of the Tier 6 Equinox out of the C-Store. Yeah, honestly, there's not a lot to say out of the ship. The only thing I really wish they would have done is just change up the secondary seat on this thing so it could be just a bit different in terms of, instead of just having all pilot, this thing could have benefited heavily from having an intel seat to make it more optimal for energy weapon builds, or a command seat to make it more optimal for torpedo builds. Like, you helped this along in one direction or another by giving it a different secondary seat. But no, they insist on putting double spec seats on these summer bundles for whatever reason. And with certain specializations, that's okay, and with others, it's a little more frustrating. In this case, though, it's still not as frustrating as Merrick Worker, though. The only other thing I'll say that is annoying about this ship is it's more of a cosmetic thing. If you look at the pilot maneuvers, if you hit the reverse one, those thruster jets don't line up correctly, and it really annoys me. Now let's talk about the stuff that this ship comes with. We'll start with the Starship trait, just because there's not much to say about it, because it's rather unremarkable. Weapons of War, every time you activate a basic weapon type, you boost all of your other weapon types, which frankly sounds pretty good. Every time you fire a weapon, you're basically buffing all of your other weapons for 10 seconds, and it actually reapplies every time you fire another weapon. So you're going to be able to keep this up pretty consistently throughout combat, which, that sounds really nice, but the problem is, the actual buff that it applies is pretty unremarkable. It's only a Cat 1 25% damage to all of your damage types to that weapon type. So it's only going to affect those four weapon types: beams, cannons, torpedoes, and mines. It's not going to affect any damage done by your consoles or your experimental weapon or any of your bridge officer abilities. It's just your weapons, your basic weapons. And it's only 25% Cat 1, which really isn't that remarkable. I remember on the live stream, it was compared that this was like having an additional console on your build in place of a Starship trait. And I gotta say, I don't agree, because like, if you look at this isomag over here, I'm getting almost 40% extra phaser damage out of that thing, and that's not taking into account the power buffs that I'm getting on top of that. So when you ask the question, what's the point of this? I guess you could say this is sort of like a starter trait, something that you would probably want to consider getting early on. It's going to be useful for a variety of different weapon types, mainly energy weapons and torpedo builds. So it'll be good for those. And also, it won't matter what damage type you're using, whether it's phaser, disruptor, polaron, etc. You could use it for any of those. So it's a okay, well-rounded trait, but if you're running for more high-end stuff, or if you've just, if you're a more experienced player and you've been playing for a long time, you probably have much better traits than this thing. So it feels very much like, a beginning starter trait when you're just kind of starting out, which is fine, I guess. But at the same time, it's like, if we're still releasing starter gear 15 years into the game, I've got to be like, what are we doing, guys? Come on. All right, moving on to the experimental weapon. This is Modular Fusion Beam. This one is kind of interesting in that it actually has 3 different firing modes, and they will change based on your range to your target. If you are 5 to 10 kilometers away, you will get the standard Beam Strike, which will deal radiation damage and has 40% shield penetration. If you are within 5 to 3 kilometers, you will gain the Lancing Beam, which will have a stronger radiation damage and have 80% shield penetration, and also deal a minor shield drain to said target. And then you will get what is called Suicide Overload, which means you will have to be in, they call it like suicide range because you're so freaking close to the target, which is under 3 kilometers to your target. It will deal a more powerful radiation damage, which has 100% shield penetration, and deal major shield drain to said target. So with this experimental weapon, you are encouraged to be as close as possible to your target, which seems really weird because the console works in the exact opposite way. I'll get more into that later. The basic tooltip is a little bit lacking in the more specifics, like recharge time and the actual amount of radiation damage that this is going to be doing, which that information should be in the tooltip, but it's not. But fortunately, it is over here in the ability description on this side. So the thing has an 8-second recharge time, which is not great. Is sort of on the higher side for experimental weapons. It's not uncommon to see this recharge time, but like anything over 6, I'm like, ugh. Additionally, here's an idea of like how much radiation damage it'll be doing, but at the same time, when you're dealing radiation damage, it's better to have some sort of exotic abilities. So I'm kind of bummed that we're back to the stage of making experimental weapons that are dealing exotic types of damage, Because I mean we've gotten a few that do like phaser and polaron damage, which have performed really well because they're being buffed by other phaser and polaron, the other damage types of that same type, which is why one of the examples of why the hexa cannons are so freaking powerful, because they can be buffed by other phaser damage buffs. Whereas this, you're not going to be buffing radiation damage on an energy weapon build, so what's the point here? And this isn't a science vessel. I'm not going to be focused on radiation damage because I'm not a science build. So what's the point of buffing an exotic damage type? This is just another example of like, this would have been cool if it was released like 5 years ago. This would have been a pretty cool thing to see, but nowadays it's so below the bar of what we've seen lately. And I did do a couple test runs, so we'll get to see just how well, or rather not well, this thing performed in a few ISE runs. But first, let's go over the console too. The console is called Dual Plasma Charge Launcher, and what it does is it fires 2 large plasma torpedoes. After it fires, it will lock onto a target, and then if it hits a target within 3 seconds, then it will detonate with plasma damage, which is typically what you would expect from a torpedo. But if it hasn't gotten a target within 5 seconds, the torpedo will explode into several missiles that will seek out up to 5 different targets within 5 kilometers of the sphere, dealing an amount of plasma damage per missile. So it's kind of like the VAQ warhead off the Texas class. So it's a similar idea to that. In addition, it does have a passive buff, which is just +5 to most tactical skills, which isn't that impressive. You can see which skills it's buffing, but it's literally +5 to the skill. That's next to nothing. So it's hardly anything remarkable. At that point, I'd rather them like cut off like half of these and then dedicate more of the skill into more of that into just the specific skills, because +5 is just it's basically nothing. Okay, here we are in the opening portion of Doomsday Machine once again to give you a look at the visuals of the consoles. Here is here's Dual Plasma Launcher. There you go, fires off some plasma torpedoes, and then it explodes, dealing some plasma damage, which is fine. But as you can see, only one of them exploded, and only one of them faded away, which is weird. And that's because they're really squishy. They are targetable torpedoes, so they can be destroyed. And it seems like they can be destroyed by other explosions, including themselves. So if they're too close to each other, one can explode and destroy the other. That really needs to be looked at, because the fact that these torpedoes are so freaking squishy means that it's possible that you're just going to miss out on your opportunity to do any damage with them, which is really dumb in my opinion. Now, I've moved back from the target to about 9 kilometers in the hopes of giving you a look at the other mode of this console, which is when it breaks up into a bunch of missiles. Now they fire off. Now the timer is going. And there they go. Now they broke it up into the quote-unquote MRF mode, and then they fire at random targets, dealing more plasma damage. That's kind of the ideal situation you want them to do. The problem is that these torpedoes are so squishy that it is very difficult to actually get them to actually fire off in that mode. The whole thing, they do decent damage. It's just, I really wish they would make it so that these things can't be so easily destroyed, even by themselves. So it feels very questionable about this. Like, what's the deal there? Now, the console isn't the only thing that is focused on range. The experimental weapon is as well, because it'll have different modes depending on how far away you are from your target. So here we are close to 9 kilometers away. There it is at that range, which, I mean, you saw there, it only did like 5k damage, which is not a lot. So let's move a bit closer. Okay, here we are under 5 kilometers. Did a bit more damage. And now within 3 kilometers. So that's when we get the most powerful version. There you go. A big issue with this thing is just like, yeah, the console is at its most powerful form when you're the furthest away from your target, when it has the most time to tick down that timer, and then you turn into the whole MIRV launcher type mode. But the experimental weapon is the opposite. With that, you want to be as close as possible, so that complete lack of synergy there really irks me. I don't like that. Now, with all this said, Borticus did say on the live stream that he was concerned about the timer on the dual plasma charge launcher, that it did seem like it was a bit too long to launch into MIRV mode. And I clearly I agree, because it took I had to be 9 kilometers away before it to actually trigger. So that that definitely needs to be tuned. I'm really hoping they kind of look into that and try to lower that a bit so it actually has a better chance of actually triggering. And the other thing is making sure that one of the charges doesn't destroy the other. I feel like that's a big issue that really needs to be looked at. So let's do this again. Here at 6 kilometers, more of a mid range. There we go. Now they actually had time to actually separate and go their separate ways. So yeah, you don't want to fire this thing too close, otherwise you risk destroying one of them basically. But if you're at a decent range, it's going to work out better. But at the same time, if you're at a further range and they have more travel time, you still run the risk of them getting destroyed by something else, because again, they are targetable torpedoes and therefore can be destroyed by something simple as enemy weapons fire or even an enemy warp core breach. Okay, I also wanted to take the chance to get a look at how weapons of war works, just in case for any of you who are curious. I also took off all of my other traits and even my duty officers to make sure nothing else was interfering with the numbers here. So let's get a look at this. Here is the current damage on my dual heavy cannon here. Fire that off. You see the buff is triggered right there. And my phaser damage went up ever so slightly on this cannon. There we go. Fire it again. The buff stays up there. Here, let's put this on auto fire. You can kind of see just how quickly this thing refreshes. It's still only at 10 seconds, but the dual heavy cannon recharges faster than that anyway. It wasn't firing. There we go. So yeah, it's really easy to keep this up consistently. You can see there it says weapons of war cannons. So all of my other cannons are being buffed. Every other damage type will get its own buff. See, let's fire off this Omni Beam. Now we got one for beams right there. And now here, let's get one up for torpedoes. Yeah, the torpedo one didn't. They don't seem to actually apply until it actually triggers. So this is definitely not going to work if you're running some kind of like a maelstrom or something like that, or something with like a really long cooldown. Even an energy weapon, even an energy torpedo, like the agony phaser torpedo from the I think that's from the Phoenix store. That energy torpedoes have a cooldown of 12 seconds, so they definitely wouldn't vibe very well with this starship trait. So I mean, the thing with this trait is, yeah, you can keep it up very consistently for a very long time, but I mean, look at the difference in damage. It's so small, it's practically nothing. So what's the point there? Now, I did run this thing through a couple of ISEs. The first one, I got 395k, which is not bad for a random ISE. The second one, I got 498k, but that was a very fast run. The other players in that run really knew what they were doing, so that was a really fast run, so the DPS numbers are going to be a little inflated on that one. But yeah, just to give you an idea of what was happening in there. In the first one with the 359k, the dual plasma charger did about 9k in MERV mode, and what did it do in non-MERV mode? And it did about 15k in its standard mode. So that's a bit under 25k, which not great for a console, honestly. And again, I think that goes back to just the idea of that these things can be so easily destroyed. If they weren't so easily destructible, you could, get a bit more damage out of these things, which would be nice. In the other run where I got the closer to 500k, the MERV mode did 24k and the non-MERV mode did 23k. So it definitely did better in that run, but that's just because that was a much smoother, much more put together run. I feel like my piloting was a bit better in that one too. So yeah, you can do okay with this console. It's just, it's not like a super great performer. Though I think one of the other things too is that this is a console that deals plasma damage. It's a plasma torpedo console, so I feel like something that is more built out for a torpedo build might do a bit better with this thing, particularly something built out for a plasma torpedo build. Now, the experimental weapon, the modular fusion beam, that was a different story, because that thing, let's see, the lance beam did 6k, the suicide overload did just under 5k, and the modular strike beam did 1.8k, which that's terrible. Like, even loaded all, added all together, yeah, that's a very, very low amount of damage. Because that was the first run, which was a bit less put together. It did a bit better in that second run. Suicide Overload clocked in at 19k. The Lancing Beam did just under 6k. And the Strike Beam did 2k. I was able to get a lot closer to my targets, but at the same time, that means I was kind of sacrificing the strength of the dual plasma launcher. Though that still did pretty decent in this run too, but again, I think that's more just indication of how well that overall run went than the actual performance of the console. Because even then, the console still only did like a little under 40k or a little over 40k, and this also not great either. It's like just under, it's like just over 25k with the experimental weapon. So it's yeah, just use the hexa cannons. Those things still rock. I will say the one upside with the modular fusion beam is that it has a 360-degree firing arc. So like if you are for some reason running a broadside build on your escort, this would be an okay option to throw on there, so you can have coverage on all sides. But if you're running an escort, you're probably running some sort of forward-facing build, in which case just run the hexa cannons. So with the Okinawa, the ship itself really isn't that bad. It's kind of squishy, but that's to be expected with a raider. It does have improved raider flanking, which is kind of nice, and it's got pilot maneuver, so you're going to be able to get into those rear arcs of your enemies a bit easier. I need to move away from this thing. These guys are loud. Anyway, the ship is okay. The console, I feel like, could be okay in certain situations on certain build types, mainly with like a plasma torpedo focus with there, but on its own, just like on an energy weapon build like this, it's really not a particularly interesting performer. The starship trait, very disappointing. I imagine the thinking there was because it has such a consistent uptime, they wanted to tone down the overall buff, and they really they went way too low with it. It's just it's so low it's not even worth having. So I wouldn't bother with that. And the experimental weapon, that's just not good at all. So yeah, just, well, okay, I will admit it's probably okay in certain situations if you want something with a wider firing arc, but there's probably better options for a wider firing arc on experimental weapons as well. I probably should look those up, but I'm not going to because I'm really tired. So the Stow Wiki is a thing. Okay, visual review time. And for those of you curious, I'm in the ship Taylor at Deep Space Nine. I find the lighting to be here a bit better than the one on ESD, because if you are especially using like the Type 8 hull in the ESD Taylor, it ends up being just absolutely blinding. You can't even see the ship. So DS9, I find it's a bit easier to see in the Taylor. Though even then, we're still getting a lot of glare off this saucer. There we go. Yeah, this is here. Let's start with the TOS version. This is the Ventura class, which appeared in the IDW comic Star Trek Crew. Very original series. I do really like this ship. Like, it's got like all the parts you would expect out of an original series ship, but it tweaks the design aesthetic just a little bit, just to make it a little bit more interesting. Like the saucer, some of the details on there are a little different. The nacelles are a different shape. These aren't just like copy pasted nacelles off of the original Constitution. Honestly, they remind me a bit more of like a lot of the original designs you'd see from Bill Krause. So I think that's a really interesting direction to go there. Here you can see the aft section. It's a little plain, but what do you want? It's a shuttle bay. That's neat. Here we can see it's also got a main deflector, which is a little interesting because I didn't see a deflector dish on the other two there. So yeah, I kind of like on this one, the name and registry are kind of on the side here. I think that's kind of neat. Just because it's different. You don't usually would see especially on an original series ship, usually you would see like the registry kind of sit up along here and along here, and probably wouldn't see anything along the rim of the saucer there. So that's, I like it when they get a little experimental with the writing on the hull. So that's kind of neat. Yeah, this is it's a cool looking little ship. I like it for an original series ship. I think this looks really cool. Just because it's a little bit of a departure from standard original series styling, but still is very clearly and firmly in that time period. So I feel like this does a great job of pulling off what they're trying to do here. So yeah, this is a cool looking ship. Anyway, let's move on to the Okinawa. This is the one from Star Trek Starfleet Command. Particularly this model in particular is actually based off of a version of the Okinawa that was made by 3D artist Howie Day. So meaning this isn't like an exact recreation of the model from Star Trek Starfleet Command, just because the model's from 1999. It's missing a lot of detail. So regardless, Stowe would have probably added a bunch of their own little detail here, but they got permission from Howie Day to use his version, which already does a lot of that. You can see it adds a bunch of little detail here along the back end of the spine of the ship. There's small details on the nacelles that he added to. I don't know if we ever get to see the bottom side of the ship in Starfleet Command as well, so I have no idea if this torpedo pod thing sticking out here is actually accurate or not, but I do like it. It's cool looking. But yeah, this is This is a really great looking ship. Here we got the shuttle bay here is on the underside of the ship. Usually would see that kind of like up here, but this is all occupied by the really large impulse engine, which I mean, kind of goes to probably why this thing has such a high speed modifier, because the impulse engine is basically just like this whole section of the ship. So the shuttle bay, which is probably very small, gets relegated to the underside of the ship. And then there's the last one, the Alameda class, which, not gonna lie, I'm not a huge fan of. I don't know what it is about this ship. It's there's a lot going on here, and I feel like it's a bit much. I'm not a huge fan of the overall shape of it. It's very square. It's very sharp. It's very angular, which is a very big departure from the other two, which are very the original series one. It's very round. It's very smooth. Very typical of the TOS design style. And then Okinawa, very Art Deco. So it's kind of a mix of the sharp and smooth aesthetics, which is very typical of the TMP era. And then I guess the thinking with Alameda was to keep going in that direction, going from round to mix to sharp and angular. And it's just I'm not into it. I don't know what it is that I'm not into it. It's just I'm not into it. Like, I don't like how the torpedo pod is basically just like hanging off the ship. Like, that was one of the big reasons why I didn't like the Duderstock class, was the deflector disc just hanging off the bottom of the ship. And doing that here again with a torpedo pod, I mean, I think it looks a little bit better than what the Duderstock did, but I'm still not a huge fan of this. The rest of it, it's just, it doesn't, I hate to say this, but it doesn't look a lot like a Star Trek ship. That's my thing here, I guess. It's just, or rather, I guess a Starfleet ship. And it's just, I don't know, it bugs me for some reason. I just can't completely put my finger on it. Why? Like I said earlier, like I've been seeing people compare this to like the B-wing from Star Wars, which I don't really see. Like, the engines don't line up all the way, and the front section, like the quote unquote saucer, is much larger than you'd see on the cockpit of the B-wing. And like I said in the start of the video, I like mine better. But yeah, that is the Okinawa. It's a pilot raider, which is not bad. It's fun, zippy little ship. Decent seating on it, just because I mean it's mostly universal, so you're gonna have a decent amount of flexibility. I do wish we could have gotten a different secondary spec seat on it, but for some reason they are adamant that these summer bundles have to have double spec seating for some reason. I really wish they'd stop doing that. But yeah, neat ship. Not very great stuff that comes with it, but if you like the look of the ship, you're probably gonna have fun flying it. So there's that at least. So yeah, let me know what you think of the Okinawa down below in the comments. And while you're down there, like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. If you'd like to further support the channel, you can check out the merch store down below, become a channel member, check out the affiliate links in the pinned comment. If you are ever shopping on the Epic Game Store, be sure to use my content creator code STU1701. Any of these really help me out, and I really do appreciate it. Either way, though, thank you so much for watching. My name's Stu, and I will see you guys next time.